Hi, I'm Dipali Shirsat. I'm founder of the Visual Poetry based in Dubai. Today, I will be speaking on the topic of design for social inclusion and how to incorporate inclusive design principles into our practice and what does it mean to eliminate disability in spaces. I was very much inspired by architect Chris Downey. Chris is a blind architect who lost his eyesight at an older age, but still practices architecture. You can see a photo of him on your extreme left. He's holding a board that says, I have been doing this architecture for so long, I could do it with my eyes closed, really. And this sort of inspired me as a designer. And I wanted to help people who are visually impaired and what sort of design practice is really needed to make the space more inclusive for them. The first shift in design thinking that happened to me is to relearn this term disability. And it is very aptly described in this illustration over here, where there are two different models of disability. One is the medical model that associates this condition related to people, that it's a physical limitation of people that is hampering them to experience the space. While the other model is known as the social model of disability. And I think as a designers, this is something that we have to relearn and adapt the social model of disability to really start bringing change in the design practice. Now, the social model states that it's a condition of the built space. So the exclusion is actually a result of mismatched interactions between the built spaces and the people. Why should we really care? And it's because there are 2.2 billion people currently living with vision impairment. And even if you live long, you will at least experience one eye condition in a lifetime. And as we are going through this presentation, every 5 seconds, one blindness case is reported. While we cannot help people who are totally blind, and this was something, a question also asked to me at the start of my research, like how can you as a lighting designer help someone who is visually impaired because they can't see, right? While this is where we need to relearn and really be aware of the term visually impaired, because there are certain categories of visual impairment from mild to moderate to severe and total blindness. And even though we cannot help someone who is totally blind because that's a permanent condition, the rest, they still have 85 to 90% of residual vision intact, which gives us a little hope and an opportunity as a designer to see what we can really do for them. What can we do as designers? And I think that falls into two categories. One is designing for multisensory experience, and other is the human and the social dimension of space. And if I have to further elaborate it and break it down, we are talking about safe navigation and wayfinding. Now, this is something which has been there in our practice, in the regulations, in the codes that we are been doing for so many years. But what about their experience of a space which is much more than safe navigation? And this is when we start to have this conversation on having multimodal or cross-modal experiences. And what does that mean is the action of one sensory modality affects or bring change in the action of other sensory modality. And this leads to some kind of social interactions which can be active or passive. Now we'll take a look at some of the examples and see where how light is really used as a medium to enhance multisensory experience, but also to aid safe navigation and wayfinding. The first example is the Cerebral exhibition in Australia. Now they had put this huge black container boxes outside in an open public space, which had braille messages on them. And these braille messages were in the form of dome-tipped LEDs. And one of the surprising incident that happened was a kid with visual impairment. Now he had blindness in one eye, with a minimal perception in the other. He could recognize the signage from a very far off distance. He ran towards it, grazed his fingers on this braille message, and he was just happy to read it. He was just happy to recognize, being able to recognize the object. And this kind of brought an imperative change in the design thinking, and the government is now planning to establish this kind of C signs in open public spaces as a part of Vision Australia. Another example is this open street in Geneva. Now, people who are visually impaired, or even the ones who are elderly, they have difficulty in walking on undefined rough textures or contours. And just by replacing some of the cobblestone with backlit pavements, you can really enhance the contrast in the space, but it also gives someone who is visually impaired the confidence to walk out and take that undiscovered route. The next example is 21 Swings in Canada. Now, I think is a perfect example of how when you design for multisensory experience can actually support inclusive design practice. Now, as the name suggests, these are 21 sets of swings, each having a dedicated musical note with backlit panels. And you really have to cooperate with the person sitting next to you. You did not necessarily talk to them, but as you move, swung back and forth in unison, you create a unique musical melody. And I think it's just a perfect example of how people are automatically drawn towards the space, irrespective of the age or any sort of diverse needs. And it just enhances that inclusiveness in a space.